Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Fish Friday number 254 and we have a good one for you today. Yes, I know this video is a week late. I apologize. As many of you know, me and Mrs. Pink finally had our second child. But let me tell you, having a newborn with a toddler is not fun. And then having a newborn with a toddler while sick is much, much worse. So that is why I am sorry. But I did miss one. But hey, 2 in 5 years, I feel like we're doing pretty good. But today's fish that we're going to be talking about is, bam, the humpback grouper. Now the humpback grouper, or scientific name Chromoleptis altivelis, again that's Chromoleptis altivelis. It is part of the family Epinophilidae, which is the family of groupers. Now, when I was younger, even though that makes me sound very, very old, when I was younger, it was part of the family Serenidae. And I guess in 2012-ish, they had became their own family. I'm not entirely sure on the timeline on that, but they do seem to be a distinct family nowadays. So they're treated as separate. That's good for me to know. Honestly, that's an interesting fact in and of itself. Is something I learned about 10 years ago, is now completely obsolete. Sorry, I am still not over this. But the humpback grouper is found in the Indo-Pacific region natively. And they're found in clear waters, in lagoons and reefs, and they're usually found in depths between 2 and 40 meters, which is 6.5 to 131 feet. But they're predominantly found in less than 10 meters of water, which is around 33 feet. So, you know, very, very much kind of like that reef fish mentality, or that reef fish, when people think of that, you know, kind of shallower water, way up in the epipelagic zone, not necessarily open water, but just in really, really shallower waters. Now, I said it was found in the Indo-Pacific region natively, but it has been found elsewhere. It was found in Florida for a few years, 1984 to 2012, and there was a lot of concern of it becoming invasive. As many of you know, there are a number of reef fish that can be incredibly invasive, lionfish being the prime example, but it seems to have died out from Florida. It was probably some releases from aquariums, but it does seem to have died out, so that's good to know. They were found in Hawaii for a long time, and I believe they were actually doing much better in Hawaii than Florida, but I believe the Hawaii populations were also wiped out, but that was done by proactive control measurements. Now, this is a medium-sized grouper, as I'd like to call it. They grow up to about 70 centimeters, which is around 28 inches. Like a bunch of the other groupers, they're pretty laterally compressed with that connected first spiny dorsal fin with this rounded second dorsal fin, rounded pelvic, caudal, anal fins. I mean, essentially, it's a very rounded out fish. In terms of coloration, they're pretty gray to beige in color with those pretty distinct darker blotches. Sometimes, you know, you can see in here there's darker blotches and then there's actual dark spots. A lot of the groupers have this sort of coloration, not necessarily this color pattern or palette, but they do have this sort of spotted appearance. So, you know, how do you know you have a humpback grouper? Well, pretty obvious here. It's got this very, very highly arching nape. So it has this very flat head, and this one is a better example. Kind of a flat mouth, almost a snoutish mouth. And then all of a sudden, its forehead just shoots almost straight up, a high, high nape. And so it's not really that difficult to identify. It's one of the more easy groupers to identify. But that high nape creates that characteristic humpback appearance. Now, they do eat a lot of fish and crustaceans, as many of the groupers do, and they are, as with all the other groupers, they are more often than not an ambush predator. So they're sitting in these rocks and crevices and things like that, waiting on something to swim by, and then they go out and grab it super quick, usually by suction feeding. If you notice, if you look at this, it actually does have a fairly large mouth. You can see this mouth comes all the way back to here, meaning they can open it a very large amount. Now, they do live primarily solitary. You're not going to find these in schools, and that's, I feel, pretty common with groupers as well. And they're extremely popular in live fish markets. So, especially over in Asia, I'm sure you've seen this, they have like sort of mini aquariums where fish that are caught are thrown in these aquarium, and then people buy them live to take them home and eat, and they'll process the fish themselves, which is actually a fairly cool practice. I'm not necessarily against that. And they are aquacultured as well. Usually in coastal net cages. They aren't as aquacultured as many of the other groupers, even though they're fairly caught often for live fish market. They're not really aquacultured as much, and that's actually because even though this is a medium-sized grouper and it's fairly common, it actually has a fairly slow growth rate. And so the aquaculture facilities can get a lot more bang for their buck a lot quicker if they do any of the other grouper species, especially some of the larger ones. I don't have the exact growth rate. I did when I was taking notes for this, which I meant to put out last week. I apologize. I've had the notes for a while, just got there. But it's just a very, very slow growing grouper. And when I talk about grouper, that's actually, and I say that it's slower growth, groupers are not exactly lightning fast growers anyway. So when I say it's slow growing, you can imagine sort of the growth rate I'm talking about. But for the interesting fact we're going to end the video on is that all of this species are protogynous hermaphrodites, which I thought was a really cool. And what is a protogynous hermaphrodite? Well, that is all of these groupers are born female, and they will transfer into males as they grow older. So it's almost the exact opposite of the clownfish, which is one of the prime examples of people thinking of like transferring hermaphroditism in fish. So in this one, they'll all be born female, and they'll go into males as they get older. And by age 9, almost all humpback groupers are male. And that actually probably ties into why they have a slower growing rate and why they are a medium-sized grouper and there. You have to remember, as I've talked about on this channel multiple times, males traditionally, especially in the fish and reptile world, are smaller than the females. And the reason for that is that the larger a female is, the more eggs she can produce. Males only have to produce enough sperm to theoretically fertilize each individual egg in a female. Sperm are so incredibly small and they're microscopic that you don't have to be very large to produce a lot of sperm. So unless they are defending territory, males are usually significantly smaller than females. Now, this is sort of the exact opposite. Chances are there is competition during breeding between the males. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this is, they're slower growing because that's giving the species more time to have plenty of females to lay eggs versus having males. If they were fast growing and things like that, you'd have to think you would not have that much time for a female to actually successfully produce eggs. versus having it slower growing. I believe they actually become sexually mature around 2 years. It gives them 7 years of being females before they're becoming males and starting to defend their territories. And that is probably where their growth rate really stops. And that's actually another pretty indicative thing of fish and reptiles and amphibians, and even in mammals, actually. Almost all species of animals on the planet, they grow really, really fast until they become, quote unquote, sexually mature, able to reproduce and able to protect themselves. And then their growth rate drastically slows down. It's why people don't continue growing. It's why humans don't continue growing beyond really their teenage years. Think about that. Everyone talks about how, oh, you're sprouting like a weed for kids and teenagers, because all of their quote unquote energy, all of their metabolism is essentially being devoted to growing. But once you reach a sexually mature age, and this is seen throughout all animal species, that growth rate drastically stops. On humans, or at least in my opinion, or in my case, I didn't stop growing. I continued this way, but got a joke about stuff like that. But in fish, they just stop growing, and they devote all of their energy towards actual reproduction. They're no longer growing. And that's actually, maybe that would be a good video on something that has always fascinated me. Or if you want to hear about this, you want to hear about tadpole size and the interesting facts behind tadpoles, drop a comment. Maybe that'll be a special video. But truly a bizarre thing, and just plenty of things to make you think. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Sorry this video was a week late, but it is what it is. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you do. I'd really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. If you'd like to support the channel, please click the link down below. It is by no means expected, but very much appreciated regardless. Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and peace.